This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Lauren Martin is a psychotherapist, poet, and devoted Ìyânífá who lives in Oakland, California. She studied poetry at Sarah Lawrence College and joins me today on Uncorking a Story to talk about her life and latest collection of poems entitled Night of the Hawk. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Lauren.
Thank you for having me here, Mike. I'm excited to be here.
Lauren, I am super excited to have you here, and I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
It starts kind of young, actually, ironically. I was in sixth grade and I wrote something, I don't have any idea what, it was some sort of basic essay, and it got identified as being poetic, and I had no idea what that meant. And then I got pulled out and put into a poetry class. And so I started writing poetry really young, and I continued it through school. I had some bumpy obstacles along the way of writing, in that I had, through my adolescence, I had a kind of ridiculous up and down around substances that detoured me a bit. And then I ended up miraculously, through the help of a lot of great writing teachers in my high school, getting into college. And there I studied poetry at Sarah Lawrence College. So
yeah, and so not necessarily a straight line, but a line that, it's sort of a path that was established early on. And you don't have any recollection as to what it was that you wrote in sixth grade that...
I'm so curious. I mean, I don't have contact with that teacher. And yeah, I don't even know what it was. And I remember it being kind of shocking, because I was at that point in my life, I mean, I've always been a much more, I would say, shy person. Even though I'm very relational, I'm a shy person. And so I was shocked that there was something that seemed unique or identifiable, because I was kind of just head down trying to get through and disappear at that point in my life. And then, somehow it got identified as different. It's so interesting.
Interesting indeed. So, like, when you were that young, did you ever have dreams that someday you might have a poetry collection out there that you'd be talking about on various podcasts?
Not at all. I did think, once I got to college and I started writing with I went to Sarah Lawrence, which is, I can't say enough about Sarah Lawrence. It's such a great school. It teaches you to think and to write, and to really digest information as your own. And so I studied poetry there, and I thought that when I got out of college, I would compile some sort of collection. And then I ended up detoured again with this extremely long, arduous shamanic journey. So then that was kind of like, well, I'll just write for myself, but not do anything with it.
Well, I can't gloss over the long shamanic journey. So educate me. What did that entail? And for those in the audience who may not know what a shaman is or what's part of a shamanic journey, I invite you to tell us.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I love this topic because I feel like it's a word that's been kind of appropriated lately. I think that shamanism is really complex, and any shaman that I've ever known has a tough life. Particularly, I began as a child seeing ghosts and seeing the dead and having bizarre incidents with the dead and the metaphysical realm. And that escalated over the course of my life as I, didn't really get initiated. I think if I'd been raised in other cultures, I probably would have been, managed or initiated in some way that would have prevented me from having the negative aspects of seeing ghosts. And so I kind of came to Buddhism, as I managed my kind of substance issues. I came to Buddhism, and I was very aligned with Buddhism. And then that didn't really fix the strange events in my life. And so I began seeking, and I went through all the different religions, and I ended up in something called Ìyânífá, which is considered the root of all traditions. But I really think that everything is the same. I think, God speaks to people in lots of different ways. And there is this, root energy that I believe represents itself in nature and in interactions with people, these divine moments of grace that could be found in any tradition. I also think that there's typically, in most traditions, historically, there was always a medicine person who was the person who kind of could see the dead and manage negativities. And I've lived that person in the Western world, which has been complicated to, finding peace or, living a life that's fairly isolated or marginalized historically, which is part of why I was like, I'm going to put these poems into a book and get this voice out there, because there are a lot of people living that way for various reasons.
Well, I do want to dig into the book, but not just yet, because,
Okay.
you said something before that I need to go back to. Not that I want to sensationalize anything, but you mentioned, Buddhism didn't, fix the problem, so to speak, of what you were experiencing, like these special things you're experiencing. Do you still consider it to be a problem? I mean, do you characterize it as a problem or more of a gift? I'm just curious as to, because not every day that I have somebody come on who talks to me about, seeing ghosts and stuff like that. So I'm curious, is it a problem?
It's hard. I mean, so the Yoruba believe, and I believe this to me is true, that people who, when you come from, your soul comes, that you come as a kid and you have one foot in the other realm, in heaven or whatever you want to call it, and one foot in this realm. And then as you age and you reach a certain point around pre-adolescence, adolescence, both feet drop in, and then you're in this world. And I think that's why kids are often incredibly intuitive and connected. So for people that are shamanistic or, connected to the dead, their foot never drops. So they're living in this divided form where they have one foot in heaven, one foot on earth, or as the Yoruba say, they're already dead. So when you're living in that way, it's complicated. There's a lot of management that goes into really being a shaman. I saw somebody sent me some meme the other day. It was like, well, if you're doing your shamanic work, your life should be good. And I feel like if you're really a shaman, your life should be hard. I mean, you're interacting with the negative, the dark, as well as the light. So, which honestly was always what, for me as a small child, gave me a deep sense of God and spirit, was the dark. That being able to see, that there were beings and ancestors that were stuck here, or see the negative sides of things, the dark shadow side, is what made me know that there was this counter in the light, and really have this deep resonance with those spiritual experiences.
When you, so it sounded like you started having these experiences when you were really young. How did they change over time? If they changed at all, and whether that changes the types of interactions you were having, or how you were sort of processing them.
They became more sixth sense like. Initially as a kid, I saw spirits in my room at night. And my dad's a physician, and I would say to him, Dad, there are people in my room. And I said, no, that's just your eyes adjusting to the dark. And so at that point, I was having this solitary experience. And then we grew up in New England, and I used to spend a lot of time in the woods of New Hampshire by myself, seeing spirits and praying and talking to things. And it was really, I had a lot of solitary communion with what I then knew was some experience of the divine. And then as I got older, it got much more complicated. I mean, I had things that people could witness that were problematic things. I mean, it got very metaphysical, and even like if you were around me, you would witness things. And so, I'd be working with clients and an earring would fall out of the air, or I mean, just really supernatural, really complicated. So it was urgent. And I became very sick, and there were a lot of pieces that meant that I had to figure it out.
So I am curious, when you were kind of going through this, were you holding these experiences in, or did you have somebody you could talk to about it? Because I imagine the burden of like keeping that in would be something that's very hard for you to manage.
Yeah, I did not have people. I had witnesses. And then I always had my sister, who we're incredibly close, and she's witnessed it. I have a very, very dear friend who also witnessed it. They both have been very committed to helping me sort it out. And then over time, I had communities who witnessed it. I had my Buddhist group, my Tibetan friends who witnessed metaphysical events happen around me. I had, a Taoist group witness it. It just, that witnessing grew, and I, ended up, kind of finding different guides at different times, and different, mentors who could help me understand it. I really had, for a long time, I mean, it was so tangible. I knew that it was real. There was no question that, when something very physical happens like that, there was no question that there was something supernatural happening. I just didn't know how to fix it. So.
And yeah, I'm curious, like when you're seeing spirits, are they aggressively approaching you, or do they have an agenda? Are they looking for your help in some way? And how do you set boundaries so that, you have a little bit of a life, yourself, without being this like vessel for, for souls looking for help?
Very good question. It's really hard. Yes, there's a huge variety in what you experience in the spirit realm. Sometimes I'll have a dream, and somebody's ancestors will come and say, you're going to see this person tomorrow. This is my grandson, and this is his name, and this is what you need to tell him, and very detailed. And then I will, be in a restaurant the next day, and that person walks in, and other times it's, somebody who's more agitated, or I've had dreams. I've seen, kids in captivity, and I've had all kinds of, so it's got all of it, the good and the bad. Anyone I think that has a remnant problem that's looming around here is typically wants something. And boundary, I still find that to be a constant daily effort. A lot of spiritual work happens around here of just kind of trying to keep things stable. And in that context, for me, things can easily go up and down very quickly. And so that alone has made my life in some ways very solitary, because I'm constantly in this bubble of reality that is uncommon.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I think life is hard enough when you don't have these. I'll call them gifts. You could use another term, but when you don't have these gifts, it's hard enough. And then layer on top of that something that's unique that the outside world is gonna think you're nutty on, or like maybe you're tripping on acid or something. Like it's
right.
And there's gonna be a lot of judgment there.
Of course, which I really it's funny that you say that, because my very dear friend, her name is Sally Ann Glassman, she's a voodoo priestess, and she's very grounded in reality and solid. And she said that to me because her journey didn't have metaphysical events like mine. And at some point she said, Jesus, life is hard enough without having this added layer. And, it is. And I think for me, I am very frustrated by the Western perception of a person who actually interacts with the dead, that you're like woo woo or you're kooky, but that existed in every tradition, every religion forever, and we've just socialized ourselves away from that.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have those people who think it's woo woo or kooky, right? Probably if I'm thinking of a normal curve of distribution, right?
Right.
Boom, they're the the 68%. And then
Right.
and then there's like the traditional religious types
Right.
who will think that you are like a vessel for evil.
Right.
Because you're doing
Right.
something that they might say, hey, our guy is the only one who can really do this. So if
Right.
if people are coming to you, you're working for the evil one. That's a term I've seen recently.
Yes.
And you're probably thinking to yourself, I didn't ask for this.
Right.
It's
I
not
didn't ask
something
for
that
this ever. Nobody does. I don't think anyone asks for this kind of journey. And then to me, I feel like what I think God is saying is, we're all the same. We're all okay, and we can have our own different journey. We're so locked into my way is the right way model, and we all get to have different experiences, and that's the incredible permission of being a human on earth, is that we all get to be different.
Yeah. Do you think, and you could say, Mike, pass, or let me phone a friend, but do you think that you're having I'll go to game shows whenever I can.
That's great. That's okay.
I wanted to be a game show host when I was a kid, to the point
I
where
think you could have been. You just pulled out that great statistic. You're like, it's the 68%. I'm like, wow, that was probably right.
I'm really good at trivia too. But you mentioned, a couple times you like life being derailed from substance abuse. Do you think that had, the fact that you have these gifts, that you are so separate and feeling isolated, did that have something to do with the substance abuse, or you can tell me I'm crazy?
No, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. I think it was a combination of things. I mean, my household was, inhospitable for a kid like me, and also a kid that I was always very psychological. So I was very truth seeking. And my mom said that I told my mom at 9 that this family is messed up and we need therapy. I don't even know I don't know. I don't know how I knew about poetry, and I don't know how I knew about therapy, but I did. So I think that was tough. And in some ways, I think, my addictive process was about trying to shut down a lot of various pains, including the noise of spirits, while trying to go to school and develop and face adolescence and separate from my parents. And
Yeah.
this was amalgam. And then, I think genetically, I also was like a fish to water. So, you have that. There is a thing that, it's indescribable unless you've experienced it. It just, there is a physiologic reaction when you have some sort of addictive process that is different for a person that has that than a normal person. Once you ingest something, it feels very different, and intention is no longer relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that,
Sure.
sharing that with me. Yeah, I'm curious. You mentioned kind of not knowing where knowing about poetry, or how you knew about poetry. Is poetry to you? Is it possible that you're like doing automatic writing when you're doing poetry? And are you like, how conscious are you, or how intentful are you when you're sitting down to write?
So, very good question. I don't sit down to write. I dream my poems. I wake up, they're there. So I do think that they're kind of gifts from the divine. I make very few edits. My sister is my editor. She has genius ideas, but typically they come very formed. And it's, strange. I'll wake up and I'll have like the poem The Waiting Tree, which is about the Chibok girls kidnapping. I woke up and that entire poem was there complete, and I wrote it down, and I suspect it's really somebody's ancestor communicating through me this elegiac poem for these girls who, a huge, I think it's like 98 of them are still in captivity, and they're constantly taking, just a few months ago, they took somewhere between 50 to 300 children. So, there's constantly kidnapping of young girls. And so I see them as gifts from the spirit realm, and that they're, communications from people's ancestors or God, or not really my own.
Yeah. So let's talk about Night of the Hawk. What can you share with us about this collection?
It's it's pretty buried. And I wanted to kind of highlight the key things that I think make people feel marginalized: spiritual difference, illness, which is very existent. I actually compiled it because I had this back procedure in 2015, and I ended up with a CSF leak, which is an injury to the spinal cord, or to the dura, which keeps your spinal fluid in. And so when I had that, I was forced to be in bed for most of 8 years. And for the first 2, just solidly in bed. And so in that time, I decided, well, you're here, you can now put this together. And so I was really trying to cover many different trajectories, and including the trajectory of adult separation from dysfunctional parents. I wanted to demonstrate the way that you perceive your parent as you age, in this kind of your own personal development and in their decline. And so I tried to cover lots of bases in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So just again, thinking about the automatic writing part of it, and the kind of things coming to you fully formed, when did you start thinking about like putting a collection together? And were the ideas or the themes in the collection something that came to you as well?
I think it was when I was in bed, and I had enough poems, and I think it was probably my sister Susanna who was like, you should put this together, and I had been writing forever, and I never thought that, especially because so much of it is so deeply personal and shamanic, that I thought, who's going to be interested in this? But then, she suggested it. I was laying there, I was like, well, I might as well put it together and start submitting it and see what happens. And so I did.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that part of the journey, in terms of, once you kind of put it together, then the act of kind of bringing it out and sharing it with people. And I don't know if this is traditionally published or self-published.
Hybrid, she writes.
Okay.
And Brooke is a pioneer for women who, have diverse stories. So.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to interview a bunch of She Writes authors on this show. What was the reaction from She Writes when they, when you submitted it?
They were really enthusiastic and willing to publish it, and they've been incredibly supportive. And it's been such a positive experience of, the clarity and strength of that whole system, spearheaded by Brock Warner, has been very moving in terms of what she's doing to tell stories for women, stories that don't fall along the typical publishing route. And, just her conviction about including women as they age, which I, as you know from my book, is certainly a theme. It's like I think that in the system of misogyny, women just continue to be devalued as they age, and Brooke does not do that. So it's been very, very positive.
Yeah, it's I have this conversation with my wife a lot, which is, she I'm almost 50, she's in her 50s.
Right.
and she's feeling a lot of pressure. And I will say this, I will apologize in advance to anybody who does these things. But I say, please don't put that shit in your face, right?
Right.
Meaning,
Right.
all the stuff,
Hmm.
and not because it's expensive, which it is, but
Right.
because I don't like. It's like there's like a thing about that look that I don't know, but it's not about me. It's more, but it also she did it once and had some terrible side effects.
Facts.
But I think that there's a pressure that women
That's
feel
horrible.
that I as a guy do not feel. Like I've got a lot of gray hair. You can't tell because the lighting is
Right.
is in this room, but like I don't feel a need to like do what my dad did, which was like put the Grecian formula in and
Yeah.
try and
Yeah.
and or shoe polish or something. But
Right.
there is a pressure that women feel that certainly men don't feel. Like it's okay for a
Yes.
man to age gracefully, but not necessarily in our culture anyway. For women to do the same. I see you nodding, and apparently
And unfortunately, yeah. I mean, I think it's lovely that you're supportive of women and women being able to age in the way that they want to. I think we're it's only, I shockingly, it seems worse. I feel like the representations of women are so extremely, hyper fetishized and feminized that the expectation of women is, that they have a ton of cosmetic procedures and not look like you've aged it, which just seems really upsetting to me in terms of this devaluing of women. And it contextualizes us into these two things, which is like, you know, sex object and mother. And then, we don't get to have this intellectual validity, which I feel like should be celebrated and shared and, sensualized. I mean, that's why I have that poem in that book that is sort of a tribute to Karen Blixen, who is the writer of Out of Africa, because I think she was somebody who really pioneered in that way and talked about being an intellect and a writer and a thoughtful woman doing things differently. And I feel like we're going backwards, not forwards around that.
yeah, I agree, and it is unfortunate. It is
Yeah.
unfortunate because I also have, I have two, so we have triplets.
Oh wow.
They just turned 22, two girls, one
Oh wow.
boy. And
Oh wow.
I look at my girls and, it's like, I want them to, I don't want them to grow up in a world where they feel like they've got to like poison
Yeah.
themselves to,
Right.
in order to feel
Stay
valued
viable.
or to stay
Right.
viable. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Hollywood is probably the worst example of that.
It's so
Um,
extreme.
yeah,
It's so
which,
extreme. And yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, having two daughters, and my sister and I were raised by a very feministic mom, and really our work ethic and our thinking was so encouraged. Um, but I feel like now, I was a tomboy growing up. I mean, I think now I would have been really ostracized for how I was. And yeah, it shouldn't be so restrictive. It has to change. I mean,
yeah, that's the part and parcel of what the whole Barbie movie was about last summer.
yeah,
It was,
yeah,
and that is this sort of monologue that America Ferrera's character had. It was just
that's
some of
amazing.
the most brilliant writing.
Yeah,
And the movie itself is a comedy, but I also love
right.
it when comedies, really are speaking about something that's much, much bigger. But
Much bigger.
in the
I
last
love
film,
that
yeah,
moment when Barbie comes out of her heels and her feet go flat, and she says, I would never wear wear these if I had known, which is, I feel that all the time. I'm like, I'm not going to wear heels. This is obnoxious. This is painful, So yeah.
yeah. I curious, like, and I know success for some authors means, selling, becoming a bestseller. Um, and that's an audacious goal, I think, for most authors. I mean, look,
Right.
making a living off of your writing is an audacious goal because it's
Right.
just next to, I don't want to say next to impossible, but
Possible.
it's most of us have day jobs.
Right.
What does success look like for you with this book in terms of what it will do for readers?
I think I love the idea of everything that you do, every action you take in your life having a ripple. So to me, if I can touch somebody and make them feel like they're okay and it's okay to be different and be in the world, and they can share that with another person and another person, that for me is meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done in my psychoanalytic psychotherapy work, is just really, every individual moment of connection and change that I can make has a ripple in the world, and that is really profound.
It's almost like, not almost like, it is about acceptance and compassion.
Yes. Yeah.
Having your poetry be as vehicles for that. Thank you for bringing up the psychotherapy practice, because that's something I do want to ask about. How do you see your poetry interacting, or sort of, what's the right word I'm looking for? I'm not finding the word.
Dissecting.
Yeah, I mean, how is it related to your practice, your therapeutic practice?
I think I think it's very related. I actually think that shamanism, poetry, and therapy are closely connected, in that if you are a good clinician, you need to train, which people do less and less of, but I think you really need to train and understand development. And then you need to do your own work. And in that, I think you can then hold the dark journey, that, because I do think real therapy means facing your soul and going into the dark night of the soul. And you need a traveler, you need a therapist who can hold that with you, which I think if you're not trained and you haven't done that work, it's very hard to do. So I think that the whole experience of poetry, shamanism, and therapy in practice live in that place of that journey and coming out the other side.
Do you have your clients do writing or storytelling at all, as part of your treatment?
I don't do it as part of my treatment, although several of them are storytellers. So they have, you know, various forms of, you know, playwriting, film writing, songwriting. I have a songwriter who's writing a memoir that's hilarious. I keep getting to hear that, but I think they are much more comfortable with their own story and how to use that in, that emotion in story, which I think is the thing that people resonate with. People want to know that their feelings aren't bizarre, and that other people aren't really living this superficial image, that they're having suffering and that they're having conflict. And then that gives them the freedom to feel okay.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the dark night of the soul, which is something that not necessarily like will happen overnight, right? So it's not like you're going to start this therapeutic process and boom, all of a sudden you're getting to that level
Ding.
of depth, right? But I also have heard, in just in sort of reading a lot about this stuff, like the rise in use of like hallucinogenics in therapy. What's your take on using things like, ketamine and microdosing, mushrooms and stuff like that in the therapeutic process?
It's a loaded question. A lot of people feel that they've had a lot of help from it. I have seen many people who felt that they were helped by it and stopped, and then it dropped off. So I think there's something, I mean, I'm trained in pretty much everything. So I think that there's something, whether it's, EMDR or CBT, I think there's something very distinctly different about going through this reparenting, holding process that you can go through over time, where you face your core self and pain. And then from there, in that place, you can diffuse out the trauma that is attached itself to your self identity and isn't yours, because that's how most people are really living. They've internalized whatever's happened to them, and they're holding that shame, and then that becomes part of their identity. Then they're reacting in the world out of that perception. It's kind of a mess. So there's nothing that replaces that, diving into that process and then kind of with a good clinician saying, hey, this isn't yours. Let's let that piece go. And what is really you? And that takes time. And I think it's understandable that people feel like they want to rush things, because it's hard to be in pain and nobody wants to feel uncomfortable. But that work stays with you. That deep work stays with you forever and
Yeah.
changes you forever.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, we spend, 18, 21 years of our lives being parented by people. So you're not going to fix that.
Right.
Or address the traumas that result in that. And there's big traumas and little traumas.
Right.
You're not going to fix that in a week, a year. That's going to take some time, and that's where the
or
doing
reading
the work,
a book, right?
Or reading a book, right? Or anything that I agree. I mean, anything that promises fast relief from these things, when these things take decades to just get set and built.
Form.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I think, so your prefrontal cortex starts to develop at 5, which is the part of your brain that's the reasoning part of your brain. And then it finishes around 25. So 0 to 5, you're just this kind of limbic sponge that's absorbing everything, and you have no capacity to think, oh, I feel this about this, or I have this perspective. So yeah, it's very baked in. And to do the work to sort that out takes real commitment and time and fortitude. And that's what I love about my work. I mean, I just find it so moving, and the courage of people to, they're seeking and they come to you. They don't really know if you're very committed and a good clinician. They don't understand how to figure that out. And so I just find it so moving and courageous that people entrust me, and we go on this journey together, and profound change, foundational change happens.
So now I have to ask, just referencing something you mentioned at the very outset of our conversation, which is when we're very young. And I think you may have said, up until 6 or so, we have one foot on one side and one foot kind of down here. And it's not lost on me that you just mentioned 0 to 5 with the prefrontal cortex. Are those related? Is that sort of related? So the formation of our prefrontal cortex to having, maybe you don't have a prefrontal cortex. I don't know.
You are really good at this factual deduction. I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of that. I'm gonna have to think about that more. I mean, yeah, that's pretty profound. I think, I just know from my experience that everything felt scary, and it was scarier because I could see everything. And it took me a lot of work to undo the problems of my, I always say that, like, I was traumatized in my childhood, and then I re-traumatized myself with my, substance use. And so it took me a fair amount of time to do that, and to have the fortitude to then deal with the amount of stuff that I see, and figure out how to negotiate that. So it's been the journey of my life. And, I feel in some ways lucky that I've had a lot of profundity in terms of what I've been driven towards and what God has wanted of me. It is deeply moving to me how I've interacted with the world and nature, and the meaning that it's given me.
So, at this stage in your life, do you feel as if you have a better sense of what your purpose is and what God wants of you?
Yes. Yeah. I think, to continue to try to leave something good behind, whether it's in words or in the shift in people's lives. That for me is the most important thing.
Yeah, almost like a vehicle for shifting people's helping people shift their lives. And like we talked before, acceptance and compassion. And Lord knows we need more of that in this world, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, I think those are buzzwords right now, but I don't see people really able to execute them. It's just, there's nobody without error and mistake. And there's nobody that is really the arbiter of that. I don't think that decision is made by somebody else, because we all have subjective perspective on what things should be like. And there's cohabitation. And how do you do that with tolerance and love and kindness? Kindness. It's really, living kindness is not that easy. And it has to come from understanding yourself and being interested in people who are different than you, which I really am. I feel like everybody has something interesting to tell you.
Yeah. But also living kindness is probably the most important thing we can do, because that is an outward sign to other people. Of course, it has to be done authentically. It can't be fake kindness.
Right.
But that'll be more impactful than anything else, I think. Just living, being the example of what you want to see in the world. Probably paraphrasing Gandhi there.
It's absolutely true. And I think it's a important commitment and so moving, because it sounds like you really are doing that in your family system with your triplets and your wife. So, that kind of choked me up. It's like they have a good dad who's really thinking about these things. I hear so many bad family stories, so it's always good to hear a good one.
Yeah. Well, I know I've asked you some hard questions, some deep questions. I'm about to ask you some harder questions that are much more shallow. So I'm curious. One of the ways I like to get to know my guests a bit is through some pop culture references.
Okay.
So I'm curious, when you were growing up, what were some of your favorite things to watch on TV?
Magnum, PI. Surprise. I watched a lot of things with my dad. We always we watched the original Shogun many times, and my dad is 86 and has Parkinson's, so we just rewatched it with him again, which was really enjoyable. So I would say those I'm thinking that's it. Oh, and Hill Street Blues,
one of the finest theme songs ever on TV. It was Hill Street Blues, just the piano.
Really good.
I love that show. Stay safe out there, right? That was the one thing they said. Magnum PI, by the way, greatest mustache. I mean, if you had to like rank mustaches, if Magnum is not on the Mount Rushmore of Tom Selleck,
unprecedented.
If he's not on the Mount Rushmore of actors with mustaches, there's something wrong.
And it's still working it, and it's never. No one has ever been on par with that mustache. I don't think so.
Agree. Completely agree. Did you give the rebooted Magnum a try?
I did not. Did you?
I did, and I will tell you this. Look, I'm impartial to the original. It was something that my older brother and I would watch together. He would always. It's funny. I'd always. We'd go down to visit him. He was living in Florida, and he'd be home at like 3:00 in the afternoon from like finishing his sales calls, and he'd always be watching Magnum PI. And my twin brother and I were like, "What kind of job does Greg have that he's allowed to watch, Magnum PI at 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday?" But
wow, so you're a twin. That's so cool. You're a twin and you have triplets.
I do.
That's really cool.
But the new one, I started it. It's actually quite good. It is, and I'll tell you what, Higgins is a woman.
Oh, cool.
And a great character. She kicks ass. She kicks ass. Perdita Week. She's great.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I can check it out with my dad. He'll be thrilled.
Yeah, and no mustache. And he might have a thin like beard or something, or a goatee. He's got a goatee.
Goatee.
Yeah, he does the goatee.
But it has to have something.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And a fancier Ferrari. But
I was just gonna ask, is there a Ferrari there?
There's a Ferrari. There's a Ferrari.
Okay,
and there's in the pilot episode, there's a great nod to the original Ferrari too. So I'll let you discover that. Yeah.
The original of the series, or the original?
The series, the one that he drives in the original series.
Piece of trivia: my very, very dear friend, who I was referencing, who helped me so much in my shamanic journey. His father was the artist who did the first illustrations for Ferrari.
No kidding.
So yeah. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we talked a little bit about TV. How about music? What did you like listening to when you were growing up?
Well, I was a punk rock kid, so I did the whole punk rock, I mean, everything, DKs, Crass, Susie and the Banshees, saw them all, here in San Francisco. Actually, I was here for high school, and that's where I kind of crashed and burned with substances. So there was a huge punk rock scene in the Bay Area in the 80s. So I listened to all of that. Now my tastes are much more varied.
No more dead Kennedys. No more.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Were the Sex
No.
Pistols in there or no?
Oh yeah, of course. And yeah, all the greats. And one of my favorite life memories was when I was moving away from punk rock was riding on a back of a moped with my boyfriend who was French through Paris, listening on a Walkman to The Cure. So it's like one of the highlights of my life. I'm like, that was an amazing moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting progression, going from punk rock to Robert Smith.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I always think of punk rock as like a Europe thing, like a London scene thing. And I never really gave too much thought to like American punk rock. But you mentioned the Bay Area. That's where Metallica came out of, the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And not punk, more thrash metal, but I guess they had that anger.
There's a lot of, the Bay Area is so weird because it's very beautiful, but it has a dark energy. I think it has a dark energy, and I certainly experienced that. I mean, I was a teen runaway punk rock kid in the Tenderloin and the Hate in the 80s, which was a thing. And so there was a huge music scene, and there were a lot of runaways that all kind of came and traveled up and down the coast. It was a huge scene. And it was pretty dynamic at the time, but very drug fueled and, not and dark. But I do think there is a weird dark energy. I mean, I think Native Americans used to use San Francisco as a place for spiritual retreat and felt that it was not the place to live. And it has a ghosty feeling in San Francisco. It's a little dark. So yeah, it's always that irony. And it's like this maudlin music that comes out of the Bay Area, or art that comes out of the Bay Area, and people are like, oh, but it's so beautiful. No, it's also dark,
Yeah, it can be. Grateful Dead notwithstanding.
Yes, exactly.
Do you have a favorite place where you like to write? I mean, I know you say that your poems come to you kind of, they like download fully formed, but
Completely.
Do you have a favorite place where you like to capture them, or?
It's varied. My house is a shrine. It has so much going on spiritually. So I feel very protected in here. And that's beautiful. I have a very strong affinity for a specific place in New Hampshire that I love so much, which is in my poetry. That place comes up in my poetry repeatedly. And, that was probably my first shrine, was, sitting in the woods and by water there. So yeah, and I just feel like nature is always there, always talking. So beautiful.
Yeah, it's talking if we're willing to listen.
Right.
I'm curious, if you could sort of go back in time and whisper some words of advice into your younger self. What would the older Lauren say to the younger Lauren? How would you reassure her?
Well, I have so many thoughts. You're gonna get through this. It's not your fault. Hang on for the ride. It's gonna be bumpy, but you'll make it through. Your life isn't gonna look like what you thought it was. I mean, I think that is kind of part of adult life, is reconciling loss and the disappointments of what you wanted your life to be or expected your life to be. And then whether it's circumstance that alters it or a divine calling that alters it, you have to accept the difference that it is and move within that, down that road. So, which is kind of the beauty of it all.
And do you have any parting messages for anybody in the audience right now, or even the host of this show? Any parting messages?
I really enjoyed this. This is a great conversation. I'm very appreciative of you having me on. This is wonderful and fun, and I just hope that people find something in the book if they read it that they enjoy, that moves them towards thoughtfulness and kindness.
Well, I know the book is hot off the presses, having been very recently released. So tell me, where can people buy the book?
It is everywhere. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I have a website that has a few local links, which is my name, laurenmartin.net. And so, yeah, people can get it. It's available.
All right, laurenmartin.net. I will be sure to put that in our show notes so people can just easily look that up. And do you have any social media where you are active that people can follow you on?
I'm terrible at social media, but they can follow me. I'm trying to be better about it. I have an Instagram. It's Frankie with a Y is a star, and that was Dogs and Nails. But now it's bigger. And then my name is my Facebook.
Very good. Well, listen, Lauren, I want to say thank you for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.